Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Moving Forward from Cancer webinar entitled I'm Moving Forward from Cancer, but I Can't Stop Thinking About It. I wanted to put this webinar on because there's a number of areas of post-cancer and living with cancer that we talk about, and particularly the idea of not necessarily understanding why we think about our experience so much and why we have such difficulty in not having thoughts that are always that pleasant about our cancer experience. So as you'll see, if you're watching, you will notice that I'm on screen and that we've got the slides on the other side of the screen, and we've also got the comments box. As you join the webinar, I'll just invite people just to say a quick hello, which you can do by typing your name as I've just done there with a hi. Your name will come up, probably won't be a picture, but that just shows us who's here throughout the session, and it's really helpful to give us a sense of who's around and what your thoughts are on moving forward from cancer. I've wanted to put this webinar on for a while. The original webinar that I did back in May was about moving forward, and this is not dissimilar to that. It just covers some slightly different areas, because I was aware that there is this guilt that we feel about constantly thinking about our cancer experience. And I wanted to have a debate with you and with more people about whether that is such a bad thing and what it might mean for us in terms of how we move forward successfully or not. So what are we going to cover today? And for those of you that don't know me, and I know that there are some familiar faces on the webinar today, I am Emily Hodge, and I mainly support people to move forward from their own cancer experience. I do that through a number of ways, coaching through these sorts of webinars and supporting wider groups of people, and also working with people one-to-one. And that can be face-to-face or in groups as well. And also run resilience workshops. They tend to be for organisations or for groups or communities of people that want me to put them on to support people to develop strategies to live with their stress or develop stress strategies and have improved resilience. And that can be around cancer, but it also might be around general health areas. My background is in the NHS, and that was an amazing experience. And then I had my own cancer experience now 6 years ago. And that really was the driving force to start what I do now in terms of bringing in some of that health experience from before, understanding my own cancer experience, struggling a lot to move forward from it. And that's really where the idea for tonight as well comes from, because I think it's really important to be honest and open about the struggle that can sometimes cause. And I know I'm not alone in that. But if you want to check out any of the other things that I do, you can see me on my website. If you don't already know it, it's www.coachingemily.com. And there's also a past back catalogue of some of the other webinars we've just run. We've just had the cancer and fertility one about a month ago, which was lovely. Did it with a great colleague, Catherine Natras. So if you want to check that one out, that'll be there too. Why do I put this webinar on? Well, we have discussions about our own cancer experience, probably with our friends, and we might have it with groups of people who've maybe been through cancer. But certainly, one of the things we're led to understand is that we should be celebrating because it's over. And when I say over, I do mean that the diagnosis and perhaps the main bit of treatment is over. There may be some people tonight who are here who it's not over for actively in terms of their treatment, or you've got a chronic disease, which means it's continuing, but the sort of acute side of the cancer is over. And for other people, you're no longer in treatment, you may have been given the all clear, you're in remission. So the technical it's over side we could start thinking about in terms of its definition, but for all intents and purposes, it's over in a way that it wasn't when it was more intense. But that doesn't mean that it feels like it's over. In fact, we're probably questioning a lot of the time, is it really over? And actually, will it come back? Because that is a huge part of our being kept in a place where we have fear about what will happen. So one of the things we always ask ourselves is, well, you know, what's my risk now? Because your risk perception has slightly changed. even if we're not thinking about whether it's going to come back, we often want to understand how we feel about the experience anyway, which sends us into a place of looking at the previous treatments. It sends us into a place of remembering the diagnosis, perhaps any of the situations that we experienced when we went through painful procedures, which can be very traumatic to think about. And trying to gather a way of understanding that can be quite distressing. Often we feel now you could delete as appropriate. We feel perhaps quite overwhelmed, we feel guilty, we might feel angry, and there's quite a lot of pressure to be over this cancer experience, to not be thinking about it so much. Now that's interesting because we might find that we're not telling people that we're thinking about it all the time, but that puts an enormous amount of pressure on us to not be honest about how we're feeling. And also, why this webinar? How do I stop thinking about it? I really want to try and look at some of the ways that we might think about that sentence in itself. We're going to cover it as part of the agenda tonight, but I felt like it was something that was important to get your feedback on too, in terms of how do we stop thinking about it. And I've put together 3 really lovely little exercises that will hopefully help you in some ways, in certain ways. But also I'd love your thoughts about what you do to support yourself to be in a different space when you're worrying about it or thinking about it. So I can see that we've got some people who've joined us on the webinar. It'd be lovely if you could say hello on the comments box. You can just pop your message in and just let us know you're there. That would be really nice. And you can also, at the bottom of the webinar, put in some questions that I can cover. So if you look under the screen, you should see questions, polls and offers. In the questions section, you can ask a sort of bit more of a detailed question. Hello, Fiona, I see you're there. Nice to see you. So what if we're going to have this discussion about moving forward but not being able to think about it, let's ask the question, what if we could think about it in a different way? I wonder if that feels possible right now at all. What if we understood what thoughts we had about it in the first place? Because surely if we're going to think about not thinking about it, we might want to understand what our thoughts are anyway. Maybe some of our thoughts are neutral. Maybe some of them are not very nice and perhaps quite negative. Maybe some of them are moving into a strange positive sense of growth, which we'll cover a bit later. But what if we did understand those thoughts? Would it be useful to us in order to move forward in a different way? And what if we had mechanisms to help us when the thoughts aren't all that pleasant? So we catch ourselves acknowledging that we're thinking about it too much, acknowledging that we're having difficult thoughts about it a lot of the time, and acknowledging that there are certain ways that we might be able to adjust that thinking. This is all quite, I'd say difficult, but it doesn't have to be difficult, but it can be quite difficult to own some of these sentences because in a way it suggests that it's our fault for not being able to move forward. It's our fault for thinking about it so much. And that's absolutely not what I'm saying. And also I think that that's what we have to try and communicate to others, that sometimes we try as much as we can to support ourselves, but we don't always move forward very well, or in their eyes we're not moving forward. Sometimes we can't try and we can't support ourselves to do anything different because it's just too difficult. And that's when it's really important to understand whether it's us that can bring in mechanisms that we can use ourselves or whether we need support from someone else, because that is the case in a lot of cases. And what if thinking about our cancer experience wasn't so bad at all? What if actually thinking about it all the time wasn't necessarily a problem? And that might be quite interesting to explore, because how might it become a different experience for us if we had other associations with it? So I'm going to start looking at some of that within this short time that we've got together. And if you also have questions that you'd like to ask the group about your own experience of moving forward from your cancer and what you think about how you think about it, it's quite meta, isn't it? Then it'll be really lovely if you put them to the group as well, because we're all here and we've all signed up really to have an experience of understanding this process and maybe struggling with it in some way. So we're going to cover what moving forward is and isn't, or may and may not be, why there might be a conflict of our emotions in our own recovery from cancer or in our moving forward experience, what the process of emotional recovery after cancer is. And that is quite interesting. Some of you may have seen the little diagram that I'm going to use, and if you've got notebooks and a pen, or a piece of paper and a pen, I'd really like you to get that so that we can draw some stuff in our session today, and we can have a look at what you might think of your own recovery and your process. We're going to cover why it's important to remember that it's your journey and no one else's. I'd be fascinated to see if that is something that you are finding tough, because a lot of people that I speak to, and for myself as well, it was a lot about what other people's expectations were of me and them in being better, in being okay now, in being no longer in treatment, in looking really well. And that can be very tough to try and get to grips with, the idea of explaining that maybe you're not so well all the time, but thank you very much, it's kind of you to say that, but I'm still struggling. So you're almost adding this negative slant to it because you're trying to be honest, but you're trying to be grateful that they've said something nice. So we'll cover a little bit of that. The actual, maybe the coup de grace is the how to stop thinking about it. That will be in there too. And then 3 exercises to help you move forward at the pace that you might need right now. And as I've said, do bring some paper, because I'll ask you to do the exercises with me. And one of them I'll particularly talk you through, which is a process which might support you in times of distress or difficulty. So we're going to kind of do that little piece of work together. It'll be a bit closing eyes. So if you're in a nice quiet place at home, if you've got a nice comfy space, then I hope you're comfy there for the next hour. If you're not, then please do feel free to go and find somewhere that you can do some work or listen to this that you feel comfortable writing stuff or acting. I'm not going to get you to act. So I can see there's a few more of us on the webinar. As I just said earlier, do say hi to us on the comment screen. It's always really nice to see that you're there and see who you are. And as always, ask as many questions as you like. The group will be able to answer them for you. It won't just be me that will write the responses. So it's always really good to get group feedback on some of the things you might be thinking. One of the reasons why these webinars might be quite useful, I hope, is because the aim of them is to really perhaps lose some of the guilt that we feel in the majority of our cancer experiences. I really wanted to have a one thing that you could go away feeling, and the one thing that I wish that you and I myself can go away feeling is just a sense of relief, and a sense that you're not the only one who's thinking the things you're probably thinking, and it's okay to be thinking the things you're thinking, and it's normal to be thinking the things you're thinking, and that there's a sense of this phew after it all. So really, if you take nothing else away from tonight, and even in the replay, if you're watching, I hope this slide kind of comes out more than any other one, which is just, it's all right, because you're on an experience that is still kind of continuing from your cancer experience. I think a lot of us think that when it's over, it's over. And actually what we begin to realise is that there's this whole other gradual part to it, which is emerging and building yourself back up again and feeling stronger in a very slow way for some of us. But ultimately trying to support our minds to say, you're all right, you're doing okay, you're moving forward at whatever pace, whatever stage you need to be doing it at. So that's really that few and that relief and that deep breath that you can say, it's very normal to have all of those thoughts. I really want to now cover this idea of moving forward from cancer. You'll have seen some of the things that I write about on moving forward, but it's a really interesting phrase in itself. So I wonder what you might think moving forward means. I'll just direct you to oh, hello Sally and hello Marie. In the comment section, you'll see above some of the names now at the top is a link that I sent you from a Dropbox file that has the worksheet for tonight's session in it. If you can take a look at that, you can either start to print it out now if you want to, or use it within the session and have a look, or you can also save it and complete it as you wish after the session, or even watching the replay back. But one of the questions, the first one on there, is about what moving forward might mean to you. And I'd be interested when I ask you that question, what does moving forward mean to you? Because something about that is really important. It will mean many different things to different people, and it probably will mean different things to the people around you too. But if anyone's brave enough, I'd love to see what you think moving forward is, and perhaps we can take a look at your definition. For me, moving forward covers so many different avenues and lots of different ways of understanding how we are in our recovery from cancer. And even those words, is it actually recovery that we're talking about? Is it maybe something where it's much, much later? So I told you earlier that my experience was 6 years ago. I certainly wouldn't say I'm in recovery. Say I'm way past that technical idea of recovery. Someone else might say I am, but I suppose I would define it as not recovery. But I am always continuing to move forward from that cancer experience. Funnily enough, today, I didn't realise I'd actually booked, or had a colonoscopy booked from my annual checkup. So today I've actually had that done. And that was this sort of irony of running the session or having the session today. It made me think, isn't that interesting? There's always something to pull you back into it, despite being not that fresh out of it anymore. So I was thinking about that today. I even had that you know, the wristband that you have when they put you in hospital. So I had that on a minute ago. I thought I'd better cut it off, but yeah, I thought I'd share that with you. It's quite interesting. So if you, Marie, that's lovely. Being happy with my new normal life setbacks included. That's really interesting, because it's not just about life is perfect now, is it? It's lots of things that are still going to happen. We still have to do the washing. We still might need to, I don't know, our car goes wrong, or we still have to move house or something. That's a really lovely idea. So being happy with the new idea, but also accepting that life is as it is anyway. Let's have a look and see some of the things that we might hope that moving forward isn't. So moving forward is definitely not putting pressure on yourself to start lots of new things. We can get a little burst of energy when we feel maybe back, not necessarily optimal, but when we feel better. And that can be really amazing. And it can put this fire into us to do lots of things. Like, I want things to be different now because I've either, spent a long time in the hospital, or I've just been too ill to do anything, too fatigued. And what we tend to do is push energy into loads of things and then suddenly burn out. There's nothing wrong with that, but actually when we get to the point that if we're using all our minimal energy up, then that's not going to be so good for us. And some of that energy might be coming from us putting pressure on ourselves from having missed out, or from having not done things when we were less well. So moving forward isn't putting pressure on yourself to start lots of new things. I think that's what you're referring to there, Fiona. That's my problem. Yeah. Moving forward isn't setting loads of new goals and trying to do them all at the same time. It's not dissimilar to the first one, in the sense of, I can now do this. I can now go here. I can now see all these people. Our diary gets completely full up. We have space in it. I don't know, maybe you're not back at work yet, or maybe you're also back at work and trying to manage that. We want things to be different. So we try and do things differently because they weren't very nice when we weren't so well. And maybe we want to try and change things from before we were ill. And therefore we have lots of goals that we want to try and achieve. But if you take away the experience of cancer and you just think about someone else who's setting loads of new goals and trying to change lots of things, they will fail if they set too many, and if they set them too high, and if their expectations aren't realistic. That's just a fact. That's a given in life. And I don't mean to say that we can't achieve lots of goals at the same time. I just mean if we try to do too many, we won't necessarily do them because we don't have that much time in our days. If you add on cancer and this new perspective we need to take into account, so perhaps a little bit more fatigue, perhaps a little bit harder to concentrate in the same way, perhaps harder to communicate with people, and then add on all these new goals that we want to do, and we're definitely setting ourselves up for a bit of a crash. I can't say how much of a crash, and maybe there is the exception to the rule, but it's more than likely that we'll crash a bit because our energy won't be very high. So moving forward isn't doing that. Moving forward isn't forgetting the past or pretending that this huge thing didn't happen. It's not about saying, right, that's it, in a box, there we go, off it is, there's the cancer. And then this is really interesting because it's quite subjective. I know that there are situations where it's very, very useful to actually imagine putting something difficult into a box. You know, one of the techniques or tools I use in my work as a coach is NLP, and NLP is very visual, and sometimes we actively get people to imagine that something bad or a difficult memory is in a pretend box. So I'm not saying that that's a bad technique, but if we're not ready to put it in that box, that, you know, virtual box, if we're not ready to be able to clean it up sort of quite nicely and put it away, then it can be very difficult because we're trying to do this big thing by pretending it's not there and then not really realizing that it's still impacting us. So as with all these things, you can see it's very subjective. Some of these might be quite controversial because you might think it is actually about pretending, it's sort of not pretending but putting it in the past. And all I'm trying to say is it's important that we acknowledge that it isn't easy to put it in the past, and it's okay when it's not. In fact, it's probably quite important to accept that it is part of our present and sometimes our future too, and we'll go on to that in just a second. Moving forward, it's also not making ourselves accept everything we've been through, warts and all. I've just checked some of the comments. That's lovely. Thank you, Fiona. I have a sense of unreality about it, and it sometimes feel I'm faking it. That's really interesting. I wonder if you mean faking sort of a happiness or faking a moving forward sense, because that's actually, that can work for you. That can be really positive. It can be quite tiring because it's sort of a bit like acting, but it also can be a sense of how much faking am I doing and how real to myself and my true feelings am I being. So it's really interesting where that balance might be. So back on these, moving forward isn't accepting everything we've been through all the time. Lots of comments come back post-cancer around, oh, it's over now, you're fine, aren't you? Oh, we just got to accept that it happened. Perhaps that's the most blunt way that it could possibly be. But if we're not ready to accept it, and if acceptance feels like a really inappropriate way to be with our cancer, then it's not the right thing for us. And it may not be the right thing for us ever, and it may not be the right thing for us now, certainly. Acceptance is a very interesting word in itself. Just because I accept it doesn't mean that I'm over it. So we might also struggle in ourselves to say, well, of course I want to accept it, but I don't know how to. Of course I'd like to be able to say I'm okay with all these things, but I'm really not. So it's a real internal struggle with this idea of these definitions. Oh, Fiona, sorry, right. So no faking that I had a cancer, but I really did and have the scars to prove it. Yeah, okay. So it's that idea of almost it not being quite real. That, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And Sally, I can relate to that, Fiona. Yeah, my diagnosis and treatment was last year. It feels unreal. Yeah, I know I went through it. Yeah, the idea of the memories still being there and very present, almost being like another person. It's someone else that went through this. And actually you can take that even to a further degree of the images of when perhaps you're in hospital, or the images of your reactions to quite difficult things. They can feel like they were someone else. And that's quite tough because you're imagining that you went through this thing, you know you did, but it's reactions or feelings that come from somewhere else, which is really difficult. It's like trying to merge those two people. So what is moving forward not also telling someone to think positively? I think that's probably a given. We've probably all had the idea that, you know, think positive now, you're going to be fine. And I don't know how anyone else feels about that. And I'm a little bit, not negative, but I'm not even pessimistic, but I think I'm realistic in the idea that it would be nice to think positive all the time. It's not always possible to, and actually when you've had something such a trauma like cancer, and I would say cancer is a trauma and it's a shock as well, and it's very, very difficult to think positively. Surely we all would if it was that easy, but it's not that easy. So what can moving forward be? so many things to many different people. Let's have a look at some of these things that it can be. Many things to many people, and we really want to respect what their version of it is. That can feel tough when our partner's idea of moving forward might not be anywhere near our own experience or version of moving forward. That idea of, actually, I need to cry about this a lot, and yet my partner is saying, but this is over. I don't understand. This was 6 months ago. Why are you still crying? Grief and the process of getting over, I say in inverted commas, something difficult is very personal, and it will affect you in a way that it will not affect someone else. You may also have had the same cancer as someone else that you've befriended since you have had your cancer experience, and they'll be moving forward differently too. So understanding what their version of their time now is probably quite important in order to communicate effectively with them. Understanding what your own version is really important, because then you understand your own expectations. Moving forward can be thinking about the future even when it's uncertain. This is quite an interesting one, because I've talked to a lot of people who maybe have not finished treatment or are never going to finish treatment, and we spoke a lot about the idea that can you still move forward when you're in that situation? And I'd argue that you can. It just depends what your version of moving forward is. Moving forward is still being able to understand what you might want to do with your day, or with your week. It just might be different kinds of goals, but either way, as we go back to number one, it's respecting what each person's version of that definition might be. Moving forward can be regaining control from all the lack of it. It's really interesting, this one, because we lose so much when we give ourselves over to our medical team, and understanding that we can grab some of it back. And I sort of do that motion because it is a bit like a tightrope, isn't it? Pulling it in, trying to get a little sense of, all right, I can understand where I can get some control now. But maybe we don't notice it until we've pulled something in again, or maybe we notice it when something that was completely out of our control before becomes within our control again, which can be quite liberating. Moving forward can also be acknowledging the things that have happened in the past and working with them, not against them. And that comes back to that idea of acceptance. Can I be okay with the idea this stuff has happened and I still want to be able to go on with it? It can be gaining confidence to focus in the right way. And it can be understanding the pace that's right for us. Our pace will be different to other people's. And that's really important as well. So Marie, I'm just looking at some of your comments. It's lovely. I've noticed that women who've recently been through it relate the same as me mostly. And is that, Marie, because you've been at the same stage of recovery as them? Is that maybe what you mean? Because that can be quite interesting around, yeah, it is, okay. So that's fascinating, because you're sort of on this path of, I'm, X number of months out of it, and they see what I might be going through. Quite an interesting point is, I've obviously said that I'm 6 years clear now. I always wonder whether people think, oh, you're talking about it so much. Obviously, you haven't moved forward, and, there's lots of interesting thoughts, but it becomes different, it integrates differently. And it's really important to have those people around you that understand the stage that you're at as well, and that get it very quickly, and that you don't even have to kind of mention it to them, and they'll get something. So moving forward can also be making tiny adjustments to start us down a way of gaining some more control. So if you have any more of your own moving forward definitions, that would be really interesting to see. And you'll see that it's on the exercise and the worksheet. I think it's 1 and 2 and 3, which is kind of around the definitions for moving forward. And most of us really want to move forward a little bit quicker, but we find it really hard. And that's a lot to do with our emotional recovery from cancer. And there's such an emotional mix up, because we have been through a trauma and it is a shock. Nobody really expects to get cancer. Nobody really expects it's going to be them. And nobody really expects that expects the reactions that you might have had, and equally nobody really expects or understands that recovery part from it, that moving forward bit, that sort of bit where you're left into the community after all of your treatment and your plans and your scheduled radiotherapy or chemo or whatever treatment you might have had, or your surgeries, and then you're kind of back home and you're meant to be so excited and happy about it. But there's such a conflict in the idea of trying to manage that big thing that's happened, and perhaps even what Fiona and Marie were saying is really true around it not really happening to me. So suddenly being asked to be this person that you were before, when this huge part of you has sort of been moved around and mucked around with for all intents and purposes, and then going back to the person you were before when you've actually sort of got to put yourself all back together again. There's a conflict of emotions because you're looking back, present and future all at the same time, which is just a mess. And that's just a headache and tiring, frankly, because we're trying to process these things that might have happened, and probably trying to process who we were before our cancer. And we're trying to process what all of it means for us going forward. What am I going to do with my job? Why do I find it hard to relate to my friends still or now? Why am I arguing all the time with my partner? What do I do about money? How am I going to work in the same way? Those awful things that happen because life tells us that we need to worry about those things, cause us to worry and have anxiety and possibly even panic about lots of things that we're going to do now, whereas we're also healing. Our bodies are also still getting over difficult things. Our brains are still processing it all, and they're probably very tired as well. So let's have a look at this conflict of emotions, because you're coming to terms with this new the new space that you're in, whilst also not wanting to lose the last one. So that really covers that last point. And also we're using our previous marker. I think I've said this word before. Has anyone heard the word detrajectorization? It was someone at a conference earlier in the year said it, and it really struck a chord in terms of being, let's say you're on a rail track and you're going along in your life and you've got this plan, and then suddenly you're kind of pushed off it into another direction and you're trying to get back to the old railway, the old track, but actually something's still not allowing you to be there. You're still finding it really hard to get back into it. And maybe what we do is we find out whether parts of you are possible to go back into the old track and parts of you are actually going to continue on that other trajectory. And that's where we start to learn, am I all right with this new trajectory? Sometimes it might be exciting and even interesting, but other times it's actually really scary and we didn't ask to be there anyway. So that really difficult conflict. Our emotional recovery, we all expect it to be time versus improvement. And if that was the case, we'd have a linear process like this. So over time, we improve, not exponentially, but in a linear way, going up in, mood, in happiness, in our recovery. The reality is that it's actually all over the place. Now, the trajectory may be improving in that second, set of that line, but it's still all over the place, and you can see it still goes back in on itself, and it still goes up and down, even though eventually it is going up. So here's where I'm going to ask you, if you can get your notebook or paper and your pen, I'd really like you to have a go at looking at what your emotional recovery from cancer has been. I'm going to skip this slide for a second. So I'd like you just to write on your piece of paper. I've just copied this diagram. So the bottom line is time, and the let's have a look, vertical line is how I felt. So the time is obviously going to be probably on the very left-hand side will be perhaps diagnosis or at some point around your actual cancer, start of the cancer journey. The part on the right is going to be really up to now. And I'd like you just to plot where your line may have been. And I have left it open to just saying, how I felt, because I haven't put happiness or place of recovery. I want to leave that for you to do. It might be, I felt well, and then plotting that along the line. So if it was me, I'm going to do this now. I might have said that this was my diagnosis, and this is say 2 years after my treatment. So we'll forget the last 4. I'll do that in another webinar. So I might have said, well, actually, I was really well, but I also then had some issues with my bowel and all sorts, and then it went down here, and then maybe I got really well, so I could start walking again. But actually, I found that was really different. I had pain, and then maybe I went here, and there was no improvement there. And then suddenly I had like a really good improvement, and then a really difficult one, and then maybe I ended up here. So if you look at the trajectory, it's actually going up. But all over that trajectory, over those 2 years, it might have been in a very difficult place. It might have been worse 6 months later after it was, 3 months before. So if you just try that exercise now, maybe you're doing that with me, I'd be really interested. I don't know whether you could even, can you put a screenshot in the comments? Probably not, but I'd be interested to know how that exercise comes out for you, and whether it's something that has been really interesting to see, because it can remove some of the guilt that has us thinking that we should be better by now, that we shouldn't be thinking about it quite so much, because actually we are all living with symptoms, we are all living with the post-treatment idea. So Sally, I'm just reading your comment. I'm only 1 year post-active treatment. I seem to split my time between being obsessed with it coming back and refusing to believe it really happened to me. I haven't found a happy medium yet. So the anxiety of a return, the anxiety of a reoccurrence, or whatever words you might use, is very present, and it's a very interesting one to look at, because it's so real for so many people. And almost the reality is that we've had this shock, we've had this sort of risk perception change, because you've had a cancer experience already, which is a bit of a shock, to say the least. So almost the idea that something unusual has happened to you is there in your mind, and that's very difficult to try and work out, well, if that could happen in the first place, why wouldn't it just automatically happen again? But what we try and do is look at where those thoughts are coming from and what might be enhancing them more than anything. We can't always stop them, but what we might be able to do is look at ways of living with them that adjusts that fear, that adjusts that process of normal assessment of risk, if that makes sense. Marie, you're 16 months and you can say you're in a better place than last year during treatment. That's lovely. Exactly. It's amazing, isn't it? Because you can really track the difference. Fiona, you've been up and down. I'm up from the lowest point rocky. Yeah, it's a very interesting place, and especially when you speak to your friends or someone else, they might see you a month ago and you're brilliant and you're amazing and really happy, and then suddenly you're in a different place as well. And that's very hard to then try and pick up the phone and say, actually, I know that you thought I was brilliant, but now I'm really not, and try and explain what that means when you don't even know yourself. It's very hard. So once you've had a look at your own exercise there, I just want to go back to this slide, which gives you a little bit of the idea. This really is modelled on the grief cycle, and it looks at all the different stages of our recovery when we're going through difficult things. You can see that really we start to understand and integrate the experience only quite late into our process. So we might have the tension, the difficulty that happened, our recovery, our active recovery might be up and down. The separation and loss is separated there, because it's almost like saying, this is a new part. This is a new part of me going through this. We then get into the more traditional grief cycle, which is all of those on the bottom curve emotions around denial, anger, hurt. And then from the bottom, where usually we're at our lowest, we tend to move in a slightly different direction. It has been shown that this does have a pattern in reality, but it's also not obviously everybody's experience. Quite a lot of us will go back round over this process. You might go down to hope, positive change, and then you might go back to fury. You might go to feeling hurt, working out the problem, and then back to fear. It's not linear, and it's not always that easy, but understanding the words that are in that process can be very helpful. And really seeing the things like, actually, yes, I did have anger. I was stuck in that phase for a long time. I did have guilt, and that, when I put the word to it, you can move forward from it. And I did have an element of depression. And then when you are able to articulate that, it suddenly becomes this version that becomes different. So what I'm going to do is, obviously you'll have access to the slides after this webinar, so you can check out this process as well. They'll be in a Dropbox in the the replay that you'll get sent. So let's have a look at, it's definitely no one else's recovery but yours. And I use this phrase all the time. I'm sure you've seen it before, but it just is so lovely. I use it all the time because it really resonates. Don't compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel, which is someone else showing you publicly what they're going through. And let's say that's quite a positive thing. And then you're kind of broken inside and actually feeling really crappy. It is all right to go through that because you're seeing someone at their highest while you're going through your lowest. Don't ever forget that that will change for you. You will become the person that you want to be at some points. It's just that when we look at other people's, maybe their own recovery from cancer, which feels very difficult to even think about because we're hopefully cherishing other people when they're in recovery, but we want to be in that part of their recovery. They look so healthy, or they seem like they're coping really well, or even other people as well. So even in the media, for example, when we hear about cancer, it's often the very, very tragic stories, or the very, very sort of amazing miracle stories, and they're very hard to sit with when you're not in a great space yourself. So watch out for that one. Watch out for if you're doing it and making sure that you're saying, I'm at the place that I'm at because I need to be here, which also can be hard to see anyway. There's a little exercise in the worksheet, and I'll show you the image of it here. We're not going to do it today, but this is just a nice way to look at who you can start to call on and be with and be yourself with in your recovery. And it's just a nice who, what, when, where, how process. Who's most supportive of where we're at, and perhaps who is less so. What action do we need to take to enhance those that are supportive and change any that aren't, if we can take any action at all? Where do we feel most able to be ourselves? That's really important. Maybe it's that coffee shop that we just love. Go there more. When do we have moments of contentment and excitement? So important to track these, because that's going to be where you feel great, comfortable, confident, able to be more yourself right now. Maybe it's a shock actually that you find that is in the local swimming pool when you hated swimming before or something. Or maybe it's in a place that you just wouldn't have thought of. How do we want to take this learning forward? So I'm going to encourage you to do that exercise on your own. And that last how is to then think about how you might take an action from understanding the answers to those questions. And again, I'll prompt you on these after the webinar because I want you to really do something with the questions. It would be lovely if you wanted to use them and let me know how you are going with them, because that's really what they're there for as well. Let's just have a look. I think that there is, yeah, that's fine. So here's the perhaps what we've been waiting for, how to stop thinking about it. So the very title of the webinar, I'm moving forward from cancer, but I can't stop thinking about it. I wonder if you've got any thoughts about how you would or do stop thinking about it. What techniques or what things work for you? Because we'd love to hear them. If it's something that you know has always worked for you, maybe it's something you've just discovered, maybe it's something you'd love to do that you know would help you stop thinking about your cancer experience. Let us know, because it's always really helpful learning from other people. This slide is quite an interesting one, because I'm going to start off by saying, if there's anything that you are worried about in terms of overthinking about a particular lump, or feeling overly tired, or finding a new symptom that you're concerned about, do go and get it checked out. And I only say that not because we suspect that something is wrong, but because at the point when you're in recovery from cancer, and to some extent we all are, however far behind our cancer experience was from now, it's always helpful to get a second opinion, a medical second opinion. What is quite difficult, obviously I'm not a medical doctor, and I can't sort of diagnose anything that's happening for you, but in a group setting it's quite difficult, because there's a fine line between saying go and see someone if it's worrying you so much that there is this thing that's happening, or you're thinking about it all the time, versus saying there's a part of it that may well be anxiety, that may well be I'm over processing it because I feel like there's this risk. So I say that first sentence because I really want that to be, the thing that you're able to do easily, and speak to a medical doctor if there is something you're worried about that you can't stop thinking about. I also want you to be with the idea that actually outside of any physical worries, that there may well be an element of anxiety that we can start to work on that will help you to manage the idea of the symptoms, or manage the idea of this fear is always there. So Marie, thank you. Mindfulness helps, and I love colouring in. My daughter brought me an adult book that encourages me to draw too, and I saw a cancer. Is that a psychologist maybe, or physiologist? I think maybe psychologist. That's amazing. I hope they were really helpful, and that's fantastic to have someone who is so specialist in that way. So how to stop thinking about it? It's okay to be thinking about it, is the honest answer. It is normal and expected. You have possibly got people around you who you've made friends with, or you know from your own cancer experience, and you'll know that they're doing the same thing. I know from my work that it is one of the biggest areas that we look at, because it's impossible just to be able to say, well, it's behind me now and it's done. I know very few people who can do that easily without there being a repercussion in terms of their emotional processing of it. So how to stop thinking about it is this gradual process of not even realising, because I don't think you haven't realised it. It's more around, it's okay to be thinking about it. It is normal. So that's the first one. What I really wanted to cover is that over time, but also just over the process of your own moving forward and recovery, the way you think about your cancer will change. The intensity of thinking about it will change. And how you manage your thoughts will also change. That may come, yes, as I said, with time, but it also just may come with you processing things differently, with you understanding how this is affecting you now, with you even being on things like this webinar. Just acknowledging that these thoughts are there is an absolute amazing step to being able to say, yes, it's part of my everyday life. I don't like it, but it is there, and I'm seeing that I want to do something about it. I say the way you think about it will change, the intensity and how you manage your thoughts will change, because you are here and you're taking a step to look at the way that you might want to not think about it in the same way. So this is no silver bullet in terms of, yeah, we're going to stop thinking about it right now, but the following exercises may be very useful in order to get you thinking a little bit more about a strategy that will help you in the very moment when you're having intense thoughts about it, but also thinking a little bit about your future, a little bit about planning forward. So we're going to go very briefly through time adjustments, anchoring, and also goal setting. We've just got about 15 minutes left of the webinar, and that will be just enough time for us to go through them. And then we will be able to do any other questions at the end. So Fiona, I'm just checking if that you've got, I do 3 pages of writing, stream of consciousness every morning, and it helps so much. There is meant to be a lot of research about that, isn't there, around physically writing as well, not just on the computer. I love the idea of that. I think it's amazing, and actually it's such a discipline, because it is quite a lot. I suspect probably 1,000 maybe words, or 750 is it in the end? That's really good. So let's have a look at these exercises. Again, if you have a pen and a piece of paper, you can do this now. If you're listening to the replay, you can do this stop and starting it, or just looking at the slides as well. Time adjustments. Let's have a go at this. This is your 24-hour day. Because we're on PowerPoint, I didn't have the ability to scribble on it, so this is going to look a little bit funny, but as I talk it through, I think you'll get it. I want you to think about what amount of time you're spending thinking about your cancer experience now. Let's imagine that that is half of your day. Some of that time you might obviously be asleep, so it might be that you're waking up thinking about it too, or it might be that for half the time you're actually awake, you're thinking about it also. Then I want you to imagine what amount you'd ideally like to be spending thinking about it. Well, maybe if it's too much, that's just too much for me. I don't want to be thinking about it 12 hours a day, and actually I want to be thinking about it 2 or 3. Then we can see that there's quite a big discrepancy between how much I am thinking about it and how much I'd like to be thinking about it. I mean, there's a good few hours where I could do many more things, or feel like I was more productive, or just be able to cope in a different way. So actually having those numbers on it is quite interesting, because that makes me feel quite shocked that I am thinking about it half my day. I had no idea. And it also makes me think, oh my goodness, how do I get it down to 2 or 3? Well, that's quite hard. How do I make the difference smaller? Well, you could say sleep more so that I don't have to think about it so much. But in all honesty, that really is a question where we start to bring in the strategies that we already use. So one of the things I do is as I coach people, and part of that work is really bringing out the things that you do already, because you have all of those within you. You have the ability to understand what they are, and you'll know already there are things that you love doing that really help you. You may not be doing them all the time. You may not yet be doing them, or you may be doing them not enough or enough to help you. But one of the ways that we look at is what you already have within your little toolbox that we talk about a lot that will help you already. So how can I make the difference between how many hours I am thinking about it and how many hours I want to be thinking about it smaller? What might you pop in the comments box? What one thing you might be able to do to help to support yourself to make the difference smaller, to get that time difference less? And this, by the way, is taking into all account everything we've said of it's okay to be thinking about it. It's all right. Some of those thoughts that you're thinking about might be actually positive or quite interesting. Others might be less so. So let's say that you really do want to minus or reduce the time you're thinking about it, particularly on those negative thoughts. What might you do to make it smaller? I imagine that some of the things that, say, Sally said, that relaxation techniques, Fiona, you've talked about your writing, that will certainly be something that makes it smaller. So if that's a technique that works for you, then it might be something that you integrate so regularly because we know that it works. It may also be that I need to look at, if this was me and I'm thinking I've got 12 hours currently and I've got 3 or 2 that I want it to be, is that realistic? Is it realistic to me to be only thinking about it 2 hours a day? Maybe right now I will think about it 12 hours. And maybe if I did this exercise in 3 months' time, that 12 hours might be 10, it might be 7. So this is really important because it gets you thinking about where you are in your timeline anyway. And then you can start to write, this is what I know makes the difference smaller already. So those are the things that you might already have in your toolbox that you bring out. And there's also number 4, which sort of is the other way around. Actually, number 4 is really around those new things you can do, or the ways that you can support yourself that you don't already have. And number 5 is the things you currently use. Have a go at the exercise, because it's fascinating to think, what would this have been 3 months ago, or 6 months ago, or a year ago? Sally, maybe some reverse psychology, allot myself some time to think about it, then put aside and get on with your day. Lovely, absolutely lovely. Yeah, I'm allowing myself X number of minutes or hours or whatever to think about it, and then that allows me to almost flood my thoughts, and then I'm safe because I know I can actually get on with the rest of it. Marie, you started some online studying. Oh, photography, that's so nice. I really love that idea. Doing something new, exactly that. Having a focus that's different. It's really important. So let's have a look at the anchoring. What I'm going to do, because we're slightly running out of time, I'm going to record you a way of doing an anchor. But an anchor is essentially a technique that you can use that brings out a really positive memory when you're not feeling so great. So a lot of people use these sorts of things when they go public speaking. And if they're nervous about it, they might be on stage, or just before they go on stage, they might have prepared their anchor before and then go onto the stage using their anchor. An anchor can be any kind of movement or body sort of technique that reminds you of a really good event. And to get that event, so it might be that I stick my thumb and forefinger together and I recall an amazing time, an amazing place or experience or event that makes me incredibly happy and relaxed. And as soon as I then put my thumb and forefinger together, I recall that event and I feel more relaxed. I feel more able to do this talk. I feel more able to go on. Similarly, for us, it may be that there's suddenly a memory, a smell even, or blog that we might read that's a bit of a trigger, any sort of everyday trigger that might bring up a memory, or I'm thinking about this too much, how can I get back to a lovely thought? It would be this anchor here. I'm going to do a video and send it all to everyone who's signed up today, because I think it's a good process to use, but it is about 5-10 minutes of doing it, and I want to get it right for you so you have that technique ready. We can also do some realistic goal setting, and that supports us to move forward in a way that's right for us. So you might say, well, how can I plan? Well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I would honestly say that we always should, because nobody knows what's going to happen anyway. And actually, if we plan and we don't stick to our plan, it's all right. We've still had a vague idea of what we might be doing. If we don't plan at all, it feels much more messy. It feels much harder to try and figure out what we're kind of moving towards, where we're going. And planning can also mean any area of our life as well. You know, we might choose to plan for our career. We might choose to plan for our relationship. We might choose to plan for our money. Any of those areas and more and more. We might choose to plan for our health. We might choose to plan for how we manage our appointments from here on in. So many ways of focusing our planning, but I'm just going to give you one very small technique for goal setting. There's many, and if anyone has also seen the blogs, and I haven't done the blog yet actually, but the planners and the journal reviews, I have them all here, which is very exciting. You've seen me flicking through them all. Here they go, and these are unbelievable for planning. So when the blog comes out, I can certainly tell you which I think has been my favourite, but also just the idea of using a format that works for you, that will help you plan, is a brilliant way. I've really enjoyed having them actually. And so this is a really lovely goal setting technique. It's very simple. It's literally asking the same, well, 4 but 8 questions, and it's just changing the amount of time. So it's working from where you are now to going forward, because some other goal setting techniques go right back to where you want to be and then pull you back to where you are now. This is saying, what do I want to have happen in the next 24 hours? How do I want to feel? What do I want to have happen in the next week? How do I want to feel? What do I want to have happen in the next month? How do I want to feel? And what do I want to have happen in the next 3 months? And how do I want to feel? Asking those questions and recording the answer genuinely and honestly can be very liberating. Because it can be, I don't want to be anywhere different in the next 3 months. And doesn't that take the pressure off? Or I want to be so very much different to where I'm at in 3 months' time. And that's about saying, okay, what can I do to help myself get there? And there'll be some points where we can't help ourselves. We need someone else to help us, and that's okay. But it's also just saying, I've set the goal. So I'm going to encourage you to do that as part of the worksheet as well, which you'll see when you have the downloaded worksheet, and think about what that is from 24 hours, because this time tomorrow, I want you to have taken some kind of action. And I want you to know that there's some kind of feeling from that action, because that's really important. And that's the momentum from today's session as well, really. It's saying, okay, Emily, set this task, and I'm going to find out what it is. And you will get an email to ask you about what you might have done. So we're just drawing to a close. We're just going to be 5 minutes now, actually. I really wanted to let you know, if you're not already part of it, we have our Moving Forward from Cancer Facebook page. I have put the link into if you go to the bottom of your screen here, no, there you go. If you go to the bottom of your screen on the webinar, you'll see questions, polls and offers. If you click on offers, you'll see that the group Moving Forward Support takes you to the link of the Facebook page. You just have to ask to join it. It's a closed group, so no one else sees the things you write. And every week I do a talk on it and get participation. So today would usually be the day that I do one, but I changed it to this webinar because I knew this was a really important topic that I wanted more people to actually be part of. Some of the people on the webinar here are members. I think we've got some of the people here. So if there's any there, I'll say hello to you and tell us if you enjoy the group. I think you enjoy it. And also, there is also, obviously, you know that I am a coach, and part of what I do is support individuals as well. So I get a few people asking me what I might do, what I might be able to do to support them. And the thing that I usually provide is a sort of series of one-to-one coaching sessions that involves looking at some of the things that we will have done tonight. So for this particular workshop, it's the worksheet that you would have seen. It's actively going through those processes and setting up an action plan for the next 4 to 6 months. Previously, I've worked with people over the course of about 6 months, and it's been lovely because it's very gentle, it's very enhancing, and I kind of wish there was some of the people here actually who could talk about it. There's no point in me telling you all about it. But it's a coaching program where we usually see each other once a month, and they get an hour with me online, and we talk literally about the plans that we've got, the anxiety they might have, and techniques and tools that people can use to move forward. It's also setting up accountability. And sometimes people ask, what do we cover? We cover loads of areas. We set our goals and our ideas quite early on, but they can change in the sense of the focus of them can change. And certainly the most typical things that I tend to cover in those sessions are really dealing with anxiety and setting up ways that we can reduce the anxiety, because that is just debilitating a lot of the time. Having confidence, improving communication with others, working and career related areas, and also being well and healthy again. So we cover a really broad range of topics in our sessions, and it's obviously just me and the individual as well. I wanted to let you know that if that's something that you want to do with me, then this is the process. I've actually just realised as well that that's wrong. There should be 4 1-hour online coaching sessions after the 90-minute one, so that's added in there, and that usually comes to sort of over £300, but that's £245 as part of the webinar. And also, if that's something you want to ask me about, then I thought what would be nice is you're welcome to text me, and if you want to do that within the next 24 hours, drop me a text and I'll call you tomorrow, and we can talk about how that might look, how you might want that support, what's best for you, the process by which you might go for, and also if I'm not the right person for you to be talking to and yet you still want that support to move forward, I can certainly recommend people or places that are going to be appropriate for you, because this is definitely about not feeling alone, and like this process is really difficult and that it's hard to. So I've left you my number there. In fact, I've got my phone right here. Here we go. Do text and I'll give you a call back tomorrow and we can talk about it if you'd like to. And I also thought if you wanted to do that, then it might be quite nice, because I'm also trialling adding personalised meditations to some of the programs that I run. So I'd love to be able to do one for you if you'd like one. So let me know if that's something you'd like. I'll just go back to the Facebook page as well. If you want to also add questions on the Facebook page to tell us the things you'd like us to talk about and cover, then you're also welcome to do that. So I'm doing quite well on time. I'm never very good at timing, but I see that, thank you, you're still with me here. And I just wanted to say that the idea of moving forward and not being able to, I'm moving forward from cancer, but I can't stop thinking about it. Really, I want to just go back to the idea of there being this relief, this few feeling of it's not just me. I can categorically tell you that everybody goes through it. And actually the fact that we are looking at it and discussing it in a safe environment shows that you're ready to process some of those thoughts and feelings about it. If you have any questions, I'd love to, I can be here for 5-10 minutes longer. So if you have any questions that you wanted to ask about your moving forward experience, or any of the sort of support processes that I use, then please do put them here. And you can see that I've said computers off. Well, that would mean that you'll just go, but anyway, sometimes we have to celebrate the fact that we even got out of bed and then we got through another day, didn't we? So well done, everyone, really. I'm just going to go back through some of the comments that I haven't managed to see here. I've got, oh, Marie, you're off to Australia. Amazing. Gosh, that's a flight, isn't it? That's an interesting one. Oh, that's really nice. And I hope that you've all had a really nice time. If you've enjoyed it, then do pop me an email to say any feedback that you've got. It's always really useful for me. And you'll be getting some reminder emails with the replay and some of those sort of resources that I haven't been able to do tonight as well. If you liked tonight and you want to share it with any of the people that you know, then please do. You'll have the replay. Or if you want to send them my contact details, you're welcome to. I am going to pop off. There are, I don't think, any questions in the bottom question pile. There are not. And yeah, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask me individually, I think you have my email. It's emily@coachingemily.com, or you can always drop me a text on my phone as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Lovely to be here with you tonight. And I hope that you are, maybe you're on your sofas with a glass of wine. I didn't ask you that at the start. Maybe you've got a cup of tea. Maybe you're going to go to bed now, I don't know. But we will all turn our computers off. And I wish you a very lovely Thursday and the rest of your nice weekend coming up. See you later.